Hello, good day to you all. My name is Lisa, and today I'll share with you a brief presentation on how the concept of ecopedagogy can be used as a model for a sustainable future. My full name is Lisa Efia Asamoah Addo. My second name, which is Efia, means a female born on a Friday. Within the Ghanaian society, particularly among the Akans, the day that you are born is very important because it also helps determines how you'll be called. So Friday on if you are born on a Friday and you are female, you are named Efia, and if you are a male born, you are called Kofi. So the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan clearly means that he was born on a Friday. So I'm a Ghanaian located in the western part of Africa, and I come from a town in the Ashanti region of Ghana called Kumewu, and this is where my root is from. But I live in Accra, which is the capital city of Ghana. Ghana is a beautiful country which is blessed with a lot of resources ranging from bauxite, gold, diamond, oil, and gas. Now, behind this beautiful land, a journey back into the past, also lies a period of oppression. Ghana was one of the main centers for the transatlantic slave trade between the 16th century to the 19th century. Now, look at this particular slide. You can see a castle on the left bottom part of the picture. This is the Cape Coast Castle. This particular castle is among a lot of other castles in Ghana that was instrumental in this period of slave trade. In this castle, slaves were kept here for a period before they were shipped to other parts of the world. The Cape Coast Castle was originally believed to be owned by the Portuguese, who used it for commercial purposes, and then later on to the Swedes, to the Danish, the Dutch, and eventually to England. The picture on your left, you see the inscription on the door, which reads "Door of No Return," and this can also be found in the Cape Coast Castle. This is one of the doors which slaves passed through before they were shipped to other parts of Europe with no hope of ever returning to their motherland. A hopeful future to look forward to. Last year, that was 2019, marked 400 years since the slave trade and was marked as the year of return. The year was used to celebrate and invite all Africans in the diaspora to return home to their motherland and to have a true feeling of how it feels like to be home and connect to their roots. One of the significant events was a visit to the slave castles, where most of them were able to walk through the door of no return, the same door that saw lots of their ancestors shipped to other parts of the world with no hope. But today, their descendants return home to reconcile and heal from the past with a hopeful future to look up to. And most importantly, remind them that they still have brothers and sisters here who are forever ready to welcome them. Now, with this background of oppression and slave trade, I will introduce briefly the work of Paulo Freire, who was a Brazilian educationist. His work, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed or Liberating Pedagogy, remains one of the basic foundations of the concept of ecopedagogy. In his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire highlights the oppressive relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor. He furthermore highlights and describes the struggle between the oppressor and then the oppressed, who continually suppressed the oppressed in a system of injustice and continually dehumanizes the oppressed. Paulo Freire also highlights on this struggle and the need of liberation within this system of inviolence and dominance. First of all, he highlights the need for total liberation or change to emanate from below, and he believes this is the best approach that can truly liberate both the oppressor and then the oppressed, because he believes that once the oppressors have been used to the system of injustice, of violence, and dominance, they have in other ways dehumanized themselves, and therefore it is only the oppressed that will be able to help liberate themselves and also liberate the oppressor. Therefore, I put up this quote which says, the only power that springs from the weakness of the oppressed will be sufficiently strong to free both. This quote, it is interesting to know how he used power and at the same time weakness, because then in the weakness of the oppressed, that is when true power for liberation can be attained. Also, Paulo Freire talks about liberation of the oppressor and conformity to old faulty system. He highlights the need for the oppressed not to conform to the old faulty system. This is because then the oppressed have been used to a particular pattern or a particular system, and these systems are the very faulty system that they need to be liberated from. So therefore, in their quest to be totally liberated, it is also important for them not to conform to that old faulty system that they are trying to break off from. Again, Paulo Freire also creates an awareness of forced generosity, where he believes that anytime the oppressor steps in to initiate liberation, it turns out to be what he calls false generosity, because then the underlying factors of dominance, the underlying factors of injustice or violence are still there that keeps or maintain the structure system, the hierarchies of oppressed and non-oppressors. So therefore, even though they may make an effort to liberate the oppressor, it is not a true form of oppression of liberation, as the same old system or pattern of hierarchy still remains intact. And an example of this remains foreign aid. Also, he talks about emancipation from old faulty system, where it becomes very important for the oppressed to be able to change their mindset and disengage their mind from the old system of oppression or dominance that they are used to. If not, then this can interfere in their struggle for liberation. And then when this happens, true or total liberation cannot be attained, because then power would basically change hands, but then the true system or the old system will still be facilitating liberation, and therefore there's a need for them to change their mindset and then change from within the old faulty system. The problem question remains, therefore, what kind of education is necessary to educate the oppressed, to reclaim their humanity, to humanize their oppressors, and also to get rid of the logic that fuels the oppressive system that constrains their humanity. Paulo Freire also describes what he calls the banking system of education, which he criticizes. In this banking system of education, the teacher is presumed to be the sole person that is very knowledgeable and therefore deposits knowledge into the students, who just internalize this knowledge and reproduces it. So in this particular picture, you can see the teacher trying to kind of deposit knowledge into the brains of the students. This kind of education gives no room for interaction or discussions, and students' opinions are barely asked. With this kind of education, the students are seen as empty vessels who cannot think for themselves and only needs to internalize knowledge that have been deposited into their mind and then reproduces. Paulo Freire also likened this kind of education to the oppressive narrative that have been already described above, because then in this case, the old system of injustice can continually be deposited or be accepted by people without questioning, without discussion, without trying to find alternative solutions or questioning it in a way. So this kind of education also mimics the oppressive system where you just internalize, accept this knowledge that have been sort of give that have been passed on to you, and therefore then you do not question it. So it also helps facilitate the every oppressive system or narrative that is around, because then there isn't much room for discussion. Paulo Freire therefore also introduced what he called the problem posing concept of education. And this, he believes, can also be an instrument for liberation. This kind of education is totally different and the opposite of what the banking system of education is. With this kind of education, it involves a lot of discussions, questionings, and also involves solidarity and mutual respect for each other, where everybody's opinion is respected. Based on the background of oppression and oppressive narrative, the concept of ecopedagogy is built. And this kind of pedagogy seeks to liberate all forms of life, which include nature as well. So then the concept of ecopedagogy highlights the need for all of us to be co-creators of our future instead of leaving it in the hands of a few industries that are profiting it off and still subjecting people and nature to toxic narratives. Therefore, with the concept of ecopedagogy, it's also very critical to change some of these toxic narratives that have oppressed both nature and society in different forms of ways. It is also important for us who are citizens of the planet to also empower ourselves as co-creators of our future for a more sustainable future, which is also built on a culture of peace, a mutual relationship between man and nature, and a balanced relationship with nature and an earth-centered ethics. In the book The Right of Nature, written by Nicholas and Ingrid, they provide 8 principles or approaches that can be adopted to facilitate co-creation for a more sustainable and mutually respectful relationship between man and nature. This includes what they call the relational care. With this ability, we are able to see the world as a living system or relations, which is made up of different parts that come together to form a whole. And also, with this understanding that we are all part of one big living system, we become more conscious of our action, particularly on how our individual actions will impact the living system in one way or the other. And how can we do this? We can do this in our own small local communities and organizations. In this way, we are able to empower each other to co-create a more sustainable future. They also introduce what they have called inner transformation, and this has to do with change of attitude and worldviews that emanates from within. And this is not learned in theories but rather in action. Therefore, what they also call the constructive actions. Now, the ecological sensitivity is when learning with the whole body is encouraged instead of just the mind. This is very important because to change behavior and attitude in a sustainable way, learning with our whole being and incorporating all the senses is key. This can be done with our creativity. Here, your ability to create becomes very critical. Taking new steps and going out of our comfort box helps to achieve this. Then there is also a need for us to engage in new cultural storytelling. Telling new stories about sustainability and doing away with the new unsustainable stories that we are used to. Example is the modern excessive consumption based culture or narrative that are not aligned with the planetary boundaries, and we have also become very much used to. This can be done in togetherness and not individually. Therefore, the intelligence of diversity. In Ghana, we have what we call the Edikra symbols. These are symbols that have been used in the local societies to represent ethics, morals, or communicate messages. One of such symbols is the Tikro Nko Ejina symbol, which literally means that one head doesn't constitute a council, or interpreted to mean two heads are better than one. It also portrays a symbol of unity and togetherness. As you can see on this slide, that is the symbol of Tikro Nko Ejina. So, in line with the intelligence of diversity, there's a need for us to collaborate and embrace different opinions and ideas. Now, behind this background of oppressive societies and the need to change these narratives in order to have an all inclusive society that is built on a more sustainable mutual relationship between man and nature, I present an example or exemplify some of the toxic narratives that needs to be changed in order to foster sustainable development in other parts of the world. And the prevalence of the old oppressive structure, a story told from cocoa farming communities in Ghana. Cocoa remains one of the major cash crops in Ghana. 3/4 of cocoa beans imported into the EU comes from Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria. Cote d'Ivoire remains number one, and Ghana the second producer of cocoa. Despite the luxurious industry known to the world, it is interesting to know that most cocoa farmers or communities engaged in the production of cocoa crop remain poor and lack access to basic social amenities. Some of the oppressive toxic narratives surrounding this industry has been the projection of monoculture of crops. Diversification of crops is being discouraged and not encouraged anymore, mainly due to the desires of big multinational companies interested in the continual production of crops. Such stakeholders and multinational companies interested in the production of crops are objecting this approach and projecting it as a risk for cocoa farmers. Also, the exploitation of nature has been part of this industry. The slash and burn method used by farmers have accounted for deforestation, and now some protected forest areas are being encroached or lost for cocoa farming activities. Also, the cost and demand involved in maintaining a cocoa farm can be very high, and this has led some farmers to involve children in the plantation as a means of securing cheap labor. The use of fertilizers and pesticides, together with the high input of labor, has increased the input cost of cocoa production, which doesn't even meet up the economic benefit they gain from it, making the production of cocoa more expensive and intensifying the poor conditions of farmers who don't have any control of the price market, as power is still centralized among the big markets. Here I present briefly some of my reflections on how the concept of ecopedagogy can be used to liberate cocoa farming communities and also help promote sustainable development. By adopting a relational approach, the entire cocoa industry, which is made up of different stakeholders, come to understand their different impact to the whole industry. Stakeholders involved in the cocoa production will understand that the impact of their actions and the need to adopt a better approach that doesn't perpetuate the old oppressive structure. In this case, the story of modern day slavery, where cocoa farmers labor to feed the huge multinational companies while facilitating environmental degradation, child labor with low financial benefits, will be reformed to promote justice for all forms of life. Also, false generosity need to be identified by cocoa farmers in order to promote sustainable development and to also liberate themselves from the oppressive structure. This is because some initiatives launched to support cocoa farmers have been found by some researchers to be still in the interest of multinationals, as these projects were still found to not only support the economies of the region, but also created new problems for them. Also, emancipation from the logic of oppression within the cocoa industry needs to be well understood, identified by farmers in order to liberate themselves from this structure. I included a question here, which is more of a rhetorical question, which states, how can ecopedagogy help revolutionize cocoa farming without following the old injustice pattern of oppression and environmental exploitation? I welcome you all to share your reflections on this particular question on how ecopedagogy can be used to help liberate this system of oppression. So I end here with a quote from Wagari Mathaya, who is an environmentalist, and she quotes, "Today we face a challenge that requires a change in our thinking so that humanity ceases to threaten its life-sustaining system. A change in our thinking is also very crucial in ecopedagogy, where we need to emancipate our mind from the old pattern of oppression that is needed to liberate us entirely." So I'd like to say a big thank you to you all, Taxomiket Midase in my local language, for staying with me through this learning journey. I hope I've been able to share with you more on the concept of ecopedagogy and how it can be used to promote sustainable development. Thank you once again. Bye bye for now.